In this series of lectures we're going to be making a database with MS Access, obviously, and in the process of making a database hopefully we're going to learn something. Okay, so the first question really is what is Microsoft Access? Most people know about Microsoft tend to use Excel, I find quite a lot, and also find that people tend to use Excel for how can I say, projects that they should actually be using Access for, which is in a sense not the end of the world, but Excel has its uses, Access has other uses. And I'd actually probably go so far as to say that 50% of the time people use Excel, they should actually be doing something in Access. So just to give you a brief rundown, we're going to be creating a database. The database we're going to be creating will be for use in a teaching institute. I'll explain as to why I chose that a bit later. The first, I don't know, 25 to 50 tutorials, I say 25 to 50, I don't know how long it's going to be. We're going to be making essentially the basic database, including all of the tables, queries, forms and reports. In that I'm going to attempt, and I say attempt here because I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, but I'm going to attempt to not use even a little bit of Visual Basic for Applications, VBA. I'm not going to make a rod for my own back, so to speak, because there might be one instance where I need to use one line, and if I have to I will. But if there's a way I can find to do it without using any VBA, I will. The reason I want to do that is to demonstrate the capabilities of Access without going into the programming side of it. And then after that series of videos is done, I'll be moving on to do a video series with Visual Basic for Applications, building on that application, and then we'll be looking at ribbons, and eventually we'll get onto the web side of Access, where it's actually is a project within the SharePoint environment. But so you know, the first series is all going to be about Access and basic videos and whatnot. Okay, so where do we begin? If you've got any experience with Access at all, what's the remainder of this video is probably not for you. If you've never heard of, or if you've just heard of Access and you've no idea what it is, you've no idea of where it's better than Excel or what its uses are, this next few minutes is going to be for you. So let's have a look at that. A good example of I think where someone's using Excel where they should be using Access is right here. And on the subject of creating some kind of teaching institute database, you can imagine that someone teaches English as a second language. They might well be based in a foreign country, and all of a sudden they say, all right, we're going to hire a couple of teachers, and we're going to get some students, we're going to make an institute. We'll start it small, but we'll grow it and make it bigger. But what we need to do is we need to log every class. We need to log the level of the students, the teachers, as you can see here. We also have the date, start time, the end time, student last name, first name, email. What else we got over here? We've got all this information. Ain't it great? All the way back there. And yeah, so this is a class basically. A class consists of a level, a teacher, a date, a start time, end time, and a student. And that's how people tend to, from time to time, use Excel to store their information. Only there's various issues with storing information like this. Number one, you've repeated a lot of data. You've repeated, for example, straight in there, this person here that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, Gratakos Solsona. Nice name. This person here is repeated in the database a couple of times, but not only is she repeated, so is all her information. So is her address, so is a telephone number, etc., etc. And that's one of the problems. So it uses up a lot of memory. Another issue is, well, what if you wanted to make some modifications to her address? What if she moved? What would you have to do? Change every first line of address for every instance that she appears in the database? You probably would. Another issue, I suppose, is the data here isn't really particularly secure. not what I'd consider secure anyway. And people can get in there and change. I suppose you could lock the worksheet. But the other one is it's not easy to create reports. It's not easy to take this data and turn it into manageable reports. So basically, at the moment, Excel is being used for something that Access should be used for, and turning this particular thing into an Access database really isn't that difficult. But how should the data be stored, and what will Access do with it that's different? Well, what Access will do is, rather than record every instance of this lady's name, last name, sorry, these students, their last name, the first name, email address, blah blah, it will record one instance of that. It will assign a number to it, which will be an ID number, and then within this record of classes, you'll have that number as essentially a lookup. So the data will be separated into different tables. You'll have a table which will be the students table, and you'll have a table which will be the teachers table. We've also got a level table and a class table, and all the information in the class table will be, regarding a student, will be a number which you can look up in the students table. What am I talking about? Let's have a look. If we go to the bottom, here's the students table right here. So all the students that featured in all those classes are here, only they're only here once. All the information is there, from the names and the job titles and everything else, but they're only here once. And over here on the left, we've got key point student ID. And what this is a primary key. And for example, back to this unpronounceable woman, this name here, you might say, oh, okay, let's use her name as an identifier and maybe a date of birth, and because it's real unlikely that we're going to get two students with the same name and same date of birth. It is unlikely, but it's possible. And also, I'd say slightly unnecessary. Looking at the student ID, she is student number 1. We will not, in Access, we physically can't repeat that number if you determine that it's a primary key. So if we're referring to student number 1, that's the student we'll be referring to. If we look at the teachers, similar idea with teachers. I've been a bit lazy and I haven't put all the info, the addresses and the email addresses and whatnot, but just for the sake of a little bit of speed. But the fundamentals are there, the name of the teacher's there, and we've got an ID. So every time we refer to teacher number 2, it's always Ian Jones. And then we've got the level table. Again, same idea, level ID and the actual level. And what we've got all this information, we've got all these keys and lookups, and what happens essentially is this first table here becomes this. Woohoo! So now it's not quite the same. First thing that's obvious is it's a lot less information, or data, I should say. There's a lot less data in there, but the data is in keys and ID numbers. So for example, level ID 1 here for this first record, teacher ID 1, student ID 1. Oh, brilliant. So what we know is that that class consists of, where's the level? I've lost you. S1, because that's number 1, and it's taught by John Stevens. Hope you're not getting dizzy. And student is the unpronounceable again. Simple as that, right? Go back to class table. Let's pick someone a bit lower down. Okay, we've got level 2, teacher ID 3, student ID 5. So the student is 5 is Martin Perez Oleata. Slightly more pronounceable, but not a lot. And I can't even remember the other numbers, but yeah, you get the general idea. However, I hear you cry. That's great, but in terms of information, that's not. So I keep moving it. That's not really helpful, because that's not very readable. I can't look at that and see the information I need. Well, this is where you need to make the separation between between data and information. What Access does is a data repository that stores data. Data is literally sort of two-dimensional grids of data, and when you need to look at this data to know something, or what Access does, it uses queries to process this information and reports to present the information. And this, I keep using the words interchangeably, data and information. Data is what you're looking at right now. Information is when it is actually processed and it's something meaningful, I suppose is the key word there. This isn't meaningful, but once it's processed, it is meaningful. Okay, and that's the end of the first tutorial due to time constraints. Join us in number 2, when we'll be finishing off the introduction to Microsoft Access. Thank you and goodbye.